Hey guys, 𝗕𝗲𝗎𝗃 here. As I've often mentioned, all of my content is part of an ongoing discussion, meaning it's open-ended, pending further information. The following is a revised video that I did a while back evaluating claims made by Costi Hinn regarding 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲. After it was published, Costi watched it and issued some comments. Those comments will be addressed toward the end. If you've already seen the original video, feel free to fast forward. Hey guys, 𝗕𝗲𝗎𝗃 here. I've got something a little different for you in this video. So a while back I was scrolling on Facebook and saw an article written and posted by Costi Hinn. I had been thinking a lot about dreams and visions as of late, so I clicked to take a look. And he had a lot of good information in there. Anyway, then I get down to this part where he's talking about 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲 and a vision he claimed to have had. He then calls Roberts a dangerous deceiver and alleges that the claim of the vision was manipulated. Oh my goodness, I can't say it. I don't know why, I just can't say it. So I comment on the post and ask him if he can substantiate these claims. Then Costi writes back and says, "The objective believer, I back it all up in this book. Hope this serves well." Then I say, "Costi Hinn, are you certain that your methods discussed in your book aren't discussed in the video I tagged you in? I don't mind reading it, but obviously you watching an 8-minute video that's free is easier than my paying for and reading an entire book, only to find out it was covered." He didn't respond, so I bite. And I figured as long as I'm going to read through the book, I may as well take you guys along for the ride. Now this isn't going to be a review of his entire book, but just the parts that pertain to his claims I was asking him about. And Costi or anyone else is free to let me know where I'm going wrong. I want to start by saying I believe Costi is a man of God. I'm sure the overwhelming majority of his ministry and teachings are biblically based, and there is plenty of good information in this book. I also want to say I'm not looking to defend 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲. Most of our content at The Objective Believer is not to defend or condemn anyone, but instead aimed at addressing the mindsets, methods, and doctrines themselves. We discuss why in our video on the genetic fallacy. That being said, let's get down to specifics. Allegation number 1. 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲's claims of a vision and speaking to God were manipulative. Hey, I kind of said it there. So most of the information in the book about 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲 was in chapter 2 titled Hall of Generals. Let's start on page 35 where the book delves into the claimed vision Roberts had of Jesus and a plan to build a hospital called City of Faith. Now I want to say up front, I'm going 100% by the claims made in this book about these events. I don't know if they're true, mostly true, or if important information is being left out. Now you may ask, why 𝗕𝗲𝗎? Why not research it yourself and verify whether or not what they're saying is true? Well, firstly, because I'm lazy, but more importantly, because sometimes I like to give the benefit of the doubt to the one making the claim in order to demonstrate that even in a best case scenario where they have all the verifiable facts correct, there's usually a lot more work to be done before substantiating these kinds of conclusions. You'll see what I mean in a second. So the long and short of it is, the book says that Roberts claimed to have had a vision of a 900-foot tall Jesus where he was told that his ministry partners would supply the money for the hospital. Quote, "Whatever version of Jesus Roberts saw that day, the 900-foot figure had no power to sustain the supposed divinely inspired hospital. Roberts tried to recover from his poor business planning by claiming that God said he would end his life if $8 million wasn't raised between January and March of 1987. Worried followers quickly sent in funds and the money was raised. Despite his ability to manipulate the giving of his partners in the short term, the City of Faith was sold to various investors as a multi-purpose office space, and today is called the Cityplex Towers." Okay, so again, assuming this is all there is to know about these events, and that there isn't another side that Costi didn't ignore in his book, where exactly is the manipulation? Unless I'm missing something, one could only argue manipulation if Roberts lied or stretched the truth about what he claimed to see and hear from God. But Costi doesn't mention how he knows this to be the case. Now I want to remind you, he said this was the book that backed up his claims. Since Mr. Hinn is not making himself available to further clarify, all we could really do at this point is guess. I suppose one could argue that since Roberts' claims involved people needing to give money, combined with the fact that the City of Faith never became a big success, that it's reasonable to conclude 𝗕𝗲𝗷𝗶𝗃𝗲 made the whole thing up. Alright, so let's work from that angle. As usual, it helps to identify any assumptions being made in the reasoning leading up to the conclusion. So what are they in this case? Well, you would have to assume that God would not give someone a vision involving the need for donations. I'm not aware of any scripture that says the topic of donations is off limits when it comes to visions. If you are, feel free to point me to it. And you would also have to assume that when God speaks or appears to you in a vision, things will work out in a particular way. Once again, I'm not aware of any scripture that says this. In fact, what it reminds me of is the time God told Moses that he was bringing him and the elders of Israel into the land of Canaan, only to later have nearly all of them die in the wilderness, including Moses. If there had been critics who wrote a book back in BC concerning the events of the Exodus, it may have sounded something like this. Whatever version of God Moses claimed to see in the supposed burning bush that day had no power to take him and thousands of others into the promised land. The point is, God speaking or giving someone a vision doesn't always mean things will work out the way we might have guessed. I just don't know what metric one could possibly apply here to look at the events surrounding Robert's faith city and definitively conclude he was being manipulative. Getting better. There are a myriad of other possibilities we could explore which could have been in play and would allow for a conclusion other than Robert's being dishonest. I read over portions of the book several times and never found anywhere that Costi showed why these possibilities should be ruled out. Now, don't misunderstand me here. Maybe Roberts did make up the whole thing. I don't know. The difference is, I say I don't know, and Costi makes definitive statements like he does know, and then doesn't seem to mention how he knows. Maybe a 900-foot Jesus paid him a visit? Allegation number 2. Oral Roberts was a dangerous deceiver. Okay, so the term dangerous deceiver doesn't appear in the book. So once again, we have a claim that is going to be difficult to test without making multiple assumptions. What did Costi have in mind when he said this? Obviously, it could have been the events we just discussed, but as we mentioned, not clarifying how he knows Roberts was being manipulative, this part of the claim remains unsubstantiated. The book does make several other accusations about Roberts that could be tied to Costi's label. For example, Roberts' views on healing are expressed with such statements like he, quote, continually rejected God's sovereignty in favor of his own theology of healing, also calling what Roberts taught blasphemy. I want to remind everyone at this juncture that taking a disagreement, assuming negative implications, and restating it to make it sound evil or of a bad nature was covered in the video we referred Costi to. See, here's the thing about disagreements. They usually happen when one person believes something to be true that the other doesn't, which means one could accuse the other of lying. Since lies are by nature deceptive and dangerous, the label of dangerous deceiver is just a hop, skip, and a jump away for anyone we disagree with. As are other labels such as false teacher or a wolf or dangerously deceptive wolfy teacher. Anyway, all that's happening here are disagreements being theatrically blown up with emotionally charged terminology that could literally be used by anyone against anyone when there's a difference of opinion. But I actually asked Costi if a disagreement is what he meant by his use of the terminology, or if he had some other metric like actual statements in scripture that could back his claim. In short, this is kind of what I was afraid of when the book was recommended to me. Spending hours trying to piece together a justification for accusations, dealing with multiple layers of conjecture, and ultimately coming up empty-handed. Oh well, maybe next time. Okay, so after watching this video, Costi responded to me on Twitter with, quote, "It's really dangerous and deceptive to tell people that God will kill you if millions aren't donated. I genuinely watched your video, prepared to learn. Godly and mature calling me Karen. That's all for me here. 2 Timothy 2:16. Hope you got the clicks you needed." Okay, so first of all, if you saw the original video, you may have noticed I sorta did call Costi a Karen. It was honestly a lighthearted attempt to address how dramatic his use of language is. But I'd like to publicly apologize to Costi and to anyone else I may have offended, and this updated version of the video no longer contains it. That aside, this appears to be Costi's answer to my question of what he was referring to when he called Oral a dangerous deceiver. telling people that God will kill you if millions aren't donated. Now, for the record, Oral didn't say God would kill him. He said God would call him home. So once again, I will warn the observer against dramatized or loaded language influencing the evaluation process. God eventually calls all of us home, and yes, sometimes due to a failure to heed his commands. Proverbs has a lot of instruction regarding ways to extend or shorten one's life. But we don't typically refer to such an event as his quote-unquote killing us. Semantics out of the way, while we are now able to pen down what Costi had in view when he said what he did about Roberts, he doesn't explain why Roberts' claims are dangerous and deceptive. As mentioned prior, if Oral was lying, then yeah, that's both dangerous and deceptive. However, Mr. Hinn had an opportunity to explain if he believed Roberts was lying, and if so, how he knows, but he did not. So while he is welcome to believe that and even share his opinion with others, the claim remains unverified at this point. Since we're doing an update to this video, I decided to go ahead and issue a response to the most common critique I've gotten on it, which is something along the lines of, obviously Oral Roberts was lying. His claims were ridiculous. Or that which is self-evident does not need explaining. Well, that depends on who you ask, doesn't it? For example, did all the people who sent in money think it was obvious that he was lying or that his claims were ridiculous? Did they knowingly send in money to a con artist? Probably not, right? So just saying something is obvious doesn't mean it is to everybody. Now, sometimes we think things are quote-unquote obviously false because they sound bizarre or ridiculous. But here's an introspective test you can perform on yourself that you might find both interesting and surprising. Ask yourself this question: what is my standard of measurement for identifying what is bizarre or ridiculous? If you're a Christian, the answer to that question can be tricky. After all, consider the things you already believe. Elisha calling down a curse on a group of 42 boys after they called him Baldy. And as a result, 2 bears came out of the woods and mauled them. God told Moses to go to Egypt, but then stopped him on the way and sought to kill him. Fortunately for Moses, he was able to narrowly escape because his wife cut off the foreskin of her son and threw it at his feet. This event is particularly interesting given the context of our discussion. I guess sometimes it is biblical to say God might kill his servant. Moving on. Ezekiel was told by God to lay on his side for 390 days while eating bread baked over human feces. Yep, go read it for yourself. God told Hosea to marry a prostitute. How about Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt? Talking snake, floating axe head. Armies of men being destroyed by a guy with superpowers wielding the jawbone of a donkey. Now that we have a little more perspective, let's return to Oral Roberts' claim. Hits a little different now, doesn't it? The bottom line is, if folks want to assume that that which seems bizarre or ridiculous automatically equates to that which is false, go for it. But that's a subjective metric, and as far as I can tell, it isn't in the Bible. Now, during the course of my interaction with Costi on Twitter, talking to someone else, he went on to say, quote, I mentioned these in my book, and he, referring to me, is upset about it. Claims I am lying, though they are documented. Little known fact, we knew Roberts personally, and my mother was his caretaker/cook in the last year of his life in Newport, California. Unquote. Okay, so for starters, it's actually pretty difficult to get me upset about any of these topics because I've been around them for over 20 years and I've heard just about every accusation imaginable. At The Objective Believer, the goal is to separate the emotion from the analysis. Secondly, I never claimed Costi lied. Anyone is free to go back and watch the original video, which I'll link to, and see that for themselves. So this claim from Costi would actually be false. Now, what I did say and will continue to say until demonstrated otherwise is Costi's claims simply cannot be verified. Now, when I heard him point out that his mother was Robert's caretaker, I was intrigued. I thought for a moment that maybe Roberts had confided in her and admitted to lying. A deathbed confession, possibly? If that is what Costi is attempting to claim here, although hearsay, it would be a fascinating twist in our investigation. However, once again, Costi does not clarify. We'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks, guys.